So the board says we have to AI something.
Yes, yes. And us on the data scientist team, we know that this quarter we definitely have to build AI things. For sure.
Yeah, and on the product team, we have to release an AI feature, but we don't have any ideas for one.
Yeah, yeah. And we're thinking that one will come to us from the data.
Yeah. We'll just make a thing and then like we'll know and it's gonna be great. Like it's gonna be awesome.
So yeah. I think everyone has bought in.
They seem really, I mean, it's only that AI projects are riskier, more expensive, and take more time than regular projects. So I think we feel super confident and we are totally ready to crush this. So something like that is probably happening in some organization like yours. Boards, investors, CEOs are pretty excited about AI. Consumers, kind of less so. There's actually some research that suggests that when you say you have an AI something, that it's undervalued in the broader marketplace because people aren't exactly sure that they want an AI something. Mm-hmm. So what we're going to talk to you about today is a little bit of what does it look like to build AI features into your product and what's different about that, what stays the same, and some advice from us on how to do that because we've both built these kinds of features for different products. We've actually never worked on the same product together. Mm-hmm. So you'll get a little bit of a different experience.
All right, let's start with what's different right off the bat. Unlike perhaps more traditional software where you're hoping to get it to production, to launch, and then you're done, ML products, AI features, begin. Kind of the interesting stuff, the most gains you can make happen after launch, which means that from the get-go, you need to be able to say, this is what good looks like, this is what success looks like, this is how we're gonna monitor how we are doing so that when we're making decisions on what to improve next, once it's in production, we can use data to drive those decisions rather than anecdotes.
Yeah, this is one of the biggest things to me. And like a lot of times we think about how do we deliver value as a product team is we deliver features to production, and then that's kind of the end of that cycle. And then we're only really looking at metrics to see, well, did people use it? Did they find value in it? But in this case, this is really the beginning. We can deliver so much more value from a model once we get it into production and we can tune it. And we need to make, but only if we make that investment and we really think about what those things are ahead of time. And a lot of times, as product people, we're like, well, oh yeah, no, we have some metrics. We don't need this thing. It worked fine in the test environment. You absolutely need to be making the investment in monitoring and evals so that you don't have drift or inaccuracy or embarrassing little problems, but yet you're actually making the thing that you spent the time to build better. So you might have heard of that AI is non-deterministic. So if you think about Excel and you put in 3 inputs in the same formula 3 times, you're going to get the same output. That's deterministic. But when my kids were little, if I'd asked them if they wanted blueberries 3 times, I would get 3 entirely different answers depending on whatever mood we were in. And that means it's more of a probabilistic answer instead of being very specific. So now what happens when you have a feature in your product that can give you multiple different answers? Is that okay? Is that desired? Do I want to eliminate some of those options? Do I want to put some guardrails in? One of the things you need to be thinking about is what does that experience look like and how does that work when it's not completely constrained and every time I ask, I might be getting a different answer. So in some cases, we have the red flags is it's too hard to measure to get it right. We just get it close enough. And we'll think about responsibility right before deployment or right after deployment has gone horribly wrong. So we really need to be thinking about responsibility at the very beginning of developing the feature.
And since you can put just about any input into an LLM, there's no constraint on the input. Similarly, there is no constraint on the output, which means that you're thinking not just about like, hey, what's good enough, but also what's kind of good enough and what's absolutely not okay. And that absolutely not okay means you're thinking about the edge cases and misuse of that feature and unintended outcomes from that feature from the beginning and definitely not after deployment. So we talked a little bit about how now the ML teams are involved not just up until launch, right? After launch, you have a suite of metrics that are being monitored so that you can continue to have a long-living product that's useful. Kind of on the other side of that work, of the technical work, the ML and AI teams need to be coming in really early in the process. There should be that conversation about what's the problem we are solving and what kind of solutions can we shape is the point at which the ML and AI teams should be in the room.
And so forcing them into the same process you're using for your other development projects is a mistake. We cannot, this is a different set of tools, this is a different set of capabilities and skills, these are different time scales. So saying, you have to be on the same sprint cadence as everybody else, you have to write tickets and do your planning and everything the same way everybody else is a recipe for things not working. And instead, what we're saying is you really need to engage that team. Let's talk about practices that work and try to really rethink and redesign your practices and the way you do planning to accommodate these different needs that these teams have.
Yeah, so planning doesn't go away.
No, you gotta still do all the same stuff. It's just the way you engage, how you engage, and what those practices are, that's gonna look different when you're working with an ML and AI team versus like just a back-end team, a front-end team, or a full-stack team. So what's the same? And a lot of things are the same. We still need a validated problem. I spent about 2 years interviewing AI and ML experts, and what every single one of them said is the most important thing is we have a very clearly defined problem, that we can really describe the input to the output X to Y, and that really makes sense, and that has a lot of depth around it. So you still need to go out and talk to people and figure out what they need and be able to figure out, so what? We don't just want to be shipping something that might be an AI feature, but if it's not going to provide value, no one's going to be excited about that. That's not going to generate any interest. And so in addition to product, now I do sales and marketing, startup life, which is like I have to go out and sell that feature. And it's like, well, I don't think anybody wants that. So why the heck are we using what few resources we have to build a feature that no one actually wanted? And that didn't change.
The next thing that absolutely didn't change, and this is part of that last slide, is like you need to be able to get some validation and some prototypes in front of your users. So the problem you think you're solving, show your users what that might look like, what it might look like when they encounter the solution you built, how they might use it. This is where something like one of the AI tools that exists for you to throw together a quick prototype. This is the perfect place to use that kind of tooling. So you could be in large part because no matter how good your AI ML model system is, if it doesn't have a UX that gives the user a really good mental model of what they should expect from as an output and how they should interact with it, it's not going to be a useful feature for your end user.
And we're hearing this a lot of time from boutique agencies that are specialized in AI feature development. They're getting far into the process, and then we're finding out that this is not what people want. So instead, in the front, when are we intersecting the workflow? How are we asking for inputs? What are people able to do the outputs? How are they judging the value of those outputs? These are all questions we need answers to before we get started. So you heard about vibe coding. This is a great application of vibe coding, is to just work that stuff up, get it out there, do a few iterations, and then you can have a really meaningful conversation about what is possible with the data and capabilities that you have. So we know what customers want, yeah, sure you do. So cross-collaboration is still required. In some organizations, AI and ML teams are expensive. These are people, there's not a ton of them in the world. They're high demand. Your fully loaded cost of a full-time data scientist or a team is going to be pretty high. So a lot of organizations want to limit their exposure. The problem is you're making too many decisions before they get involved. So just like we want to collaborate at key moments with engineering, if you're a product manager or designer, you really want to engage the ML team at the right moments early on to guide the effort so that you're not getting too far down the path only to realize that you don't actually have a feasible project.
I have to say that is a giant red flag on the data science side when someone's like, we just need you to build a thing. We figured out all the data and the use case. You just need to build a thing. And it never goes that way. So that's like huge nightmare red flag for me. So actually, a very, very highly probable outcome from that scenario is one where you turn around and you're like, so we've built a ton of AI features. They're all in production, and they're all in version 1. Like, we haven't iterated on any of them, and we also are still struggling to show the value of the AI features we have built. All of that is a result of kind of thinking really short term, and this kind of goes back to the thing with ML products, AI products, and timeline. You need to, one, be thinking about monitoring and iteration when you begin building that V1, and second, you often, let's say you're building a RAG system, and you're like, you know what, we have a really good retrieval mechanism for information. It generates a response, and it seems fine. The difference between kind of approaching this in a short-term way versus like a long-term AI strategy is you may know that, hey, we have this other feature coming out that's actually gonna focus on generating better content. That can build off of, you know, our new RAG system can build off of that. So like planning out the infrastructure needs you have in a rolling fashion that doesn't require you to build everything now is another upside of not just being short-term.
And on the product side, it's really important that you're taking a long-term view to your data. So a lot of organizations are trying to make decisions about what data do we collect, what data are we buying, so what commercial relationships we're entering into to buy data, and then how are we going to correlate that data together. And these are huge teams of people that are doing a lot of detailed work. They cannot turn in a dime. So as a product leader thinking about where we're going to go, what kind of data needs do we have this year, the year before, the year after? So we're really thinking about how we're going to get it, how we're going to maintain and store it, and how we're going to make sure that it's going to be able to provide the kind of experience that we want to have. Because the thing that actually is going to turn the slowest in an organization is your data and how it's governed, managed, and if it's going to be ready or not. I know of people who spent like 2 years trying to correlate and clean data before they even got to work on the product that they wanted to release. 2 problems with that. One, that was a lot of money they spent before they got any return on that. And the second problem is they realized the schema was wrong. And that's another reason why we want to do prototyping, because that'll expose how we're using it, and it might become very obvious that the way the data has been constructed or collected is not going to work for our purpose. So I guess that leads us into the next one, which is high quality data is still essential. So you've heard it a bunch. It's still very true. Are there things you can do with limited data? Absolutely. Should you do that? Definitely, and especially if you are early on. So at Ops Canvas, we're a cloud orchestration company. We help people be able to identify what's going on with their deployments, what kind of money they're spending on their apps and their cloud environments, and if they have any zombie environments, which are things that they've forgotten. We were able to test out a lot of our ideas using proxy data and in smaller data sets just to say, is this possible? What kind of results will we yield? And we were able to use that before we were getting really high quality production data. But those are the kinds of things that you need to be thinking about pretty early in the process. So what should you do? What are the things that we're seeing working for people who building features?
So this is back to that use case kind of conversation, but you're starting with the strategy. You need to have a kind of a clear business value and a clear customer value that's coming out of this AI work or feature that you're working on.
The next thing is we define and validate use cases first. So a lot of times we talk about input to output. What is that output that you're seeking to create? So let's say I have a lawn company. I'm going to take an input. I'm going to have pictures of my customer's lawn. And they're going to take a lot of different pictures up close and find it so I can determine what the current state of their lawn is. But the output I want to get to is a certain color green and a certain height and a certain amount of cost and effort to maintain it. And I want to be able to see that across multiple things. So you need to be able to articulate super clearly what actually you need that team to create.
Yeah. So, and what happens when you do that is that now it's possible to say, on average, my customers have a green quotient of 5 for all of their lawns. My goal is I can always promise them that I'll get them to this is, if any of you know gardening, I'm sorry that I'm butchering.
Yeah, we're totally making this up.
We can make your yard more green by 0.1, right? And like, so that's when you get to the point, the data science side of it, where you're like, this is our baseline. We know we validated the problem, we know what we're trying to solve, which means we now can measure how well we're solving it at the moment. And then you're able to say, hey, this is the improvement we can show.
And we're thinking about risk from the start. So what are we thinking about? We're thinking about, what constraints we look at, what chemicals we might want to think about, what kind of labor costs or what kind of regulation might be involved. And we're identifying our key risk indicators at the beginning of the project. So as the ML team is starting to use models, not only do they have key performance indicators, they also have key risk indicators. And we're not just waiting to the end to say, well, it's good enough.
Engaging the AI and ML team thoughtfully. I've heard Jess say a lot, these people cost a lot of money.
Yes.
And then, that is so true.
I've heard that a lot.
And there is going to be kind of an ongoing relationship with this team. The actual ebb and flow of it might look like it's more intensive when you're in this build process, but it doesn't go away when you're kind of doing that early strategy shaping or the definition of the solution you're coming up with.
Yeah. And we all know that we'll all say start from strategy. And we all realize that most executives actually suck at strategy. And so the question is, what do I do next? Well, chances are, if you don't have a strategy to work with and you can't figure out what it is, which is the thing that happens, how are you increasing revenue or increasing the experience or reducing costs, or how are you preventing any sort of regulatory thing? So tie back to one of those ideas and say, well, we think we can reduce costs because our customers are doing invoice reconciliation and it takes them 20 hours a month in order to get all the invoices out. Well, if we could reduce that, we could collect money faster, and then all of a sudden I've written a use case even though I didn't have the strategy. So you don't have to have it, but at least you have to have a story about what value you're creating. And so we kind of came up with this idea is we want to, when we're thinking about ideas and we're coming up with it, we want to talk to the team to see, the ML, AI team to see what's valuable. We'll go out and prototype and test those ideas. And when it comes to evaluating those ideas, we'll re-engage with the team and say, okay, well, here's what we learned from doing that prototyping and test phase. So we can now decide, okay, do we want to move on to defining this feature or do we need to do a few more rounds? And so in that case, we can really engage them at really key moments to make smarter decisions about what features. Because it's a lot better to do 3 things that are really good than 10 V1s that don't go anywhere.
I wanted to touch on the tooling that is currently available as you're building these AI products. Right now, there is this huge influx of tools that are available for you to begin your design work, to begin your user research, to manage your data pipelines, to look at your data quality and governance. And I personally, my last few jobs have all been at startups, so I've gotten to sample a ton of these tools. And what I found is that there will often be a case where the use case this particular startup has built this tool for that we are considering isn't exactly what we want, but it's close enough that we could use it and then outgrow it at some point, which became pretty important because we had a handful of data scientists and no capacity to take on a whole other new use case in addition to what we were already building. So we definitely used tools and then waited to outgrow them. Or in one scenario, when the generative AI boom was first happening, we already had LLMs in production. We didn't have a good way to measure how good was when it was producing text. Prior to GPT-3, we always were like, don't let them produce text, just have them spit out a probability. And we partnered with a startup that was starting to build those metrics. And we were their customer zero, we were dog fooding for them. But it was a really great partnership because where there is tooling you can use, definitely we ended up needing to use it because there was tooling we absolutely had to build ourselves as well.
So it's okay to build and outgrow and then know exactly why you're outgrowing it so then you can get to the next technology. But do not, the engineering team, you know how it goes sometimes with engineering teams. I gotta build all the tooling myself. No, you don't. You should be keeping the things core to you and be building that. And the other things, you're making smart buys and making sure you have flexible architecture so you can move things on and along. Because a team that spends every single day trying to make this one thing work is going to do a better job than you trying to spend 10% of your time making the thing work. Okay, so the last one is establishing a feedback loop. So if I say something is potentially fraudulent, and it turns out to be okay, I kind of need to know that. If I say, I'm going to recommend this movie to you, hey, did you like it? You have to have a feedback loop in order to say if the recommendations that we're making or the actions that we're taking actually make sense. So in our world, we'll say, we think this is a zombie resource, means this is an environment you spun up and nobody's actually using it. We think you should shut it down because it's a security risk. Because we're fairly new and we don't know the ins and outs of your infrastructure, we're not just going to shut it down and hope for the best. We're going to say, hey, by the way, we think this is not quite good. We have some confidence interval to make that recommendation. Now, we want you to interact with it. It's one of the ways a human is in the loop. Humans are in the loop in evaluation and giving feedback, in training, and helping define the guardrails of what the things are going to do from the beginning. And so that kind of feedback loop is definitely something that you need, and without it, you're never going to be able to progress the accuracy and the value of your feature.
Yeah. Continuous learning is something we've used as a term in machine learning for a long time. Most places don't have continuous learning in place. What that means is that you are automatically in some way collecting feedback and integrating it and updating your system. This component is crucial for that, so that you know that the product you're building doesn't just drift away from the use case that it was originally serving over time.
Because that's going to be super embarrassing. If 6 months from now nobody's watching it and it goes haywire, that is a PR problem. So all the slides are online already, and there's a bunch of resources and things that we link there too.